Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." This quote invites us to explore a rich, unknown universe, the inner world. In a society that constantly pushes us to focus outward, on achievements and others' expectations, we're rarely encouraged to build an authentic relationship with our own inner voice. But what does this voice really mean? And why did Jung believe that true awakening is only possible when we turn inward? In Jung's view, the concept of the inner voice is closely tied to individuation, the journey of self-discovery that leads to personal fulfillment and wholeness. To him, this inner voice is the expression of ourself, the true essence that holds the full scope of who we are, with all our contradictions, shadows, and potential. When we learn to listen to and understand this voice, we become more genuine, more complete, finding peace within our own existence. In this video, we'll explore how this inner voice can guide us on our journey and why, to find peace with it, we must accept both the light and dark sides within ourselves. We'll see how attentive listening to this voice helps us access the unconscious, face our fears, and ultimately live more balanced, authentic lives. Jung teaches us that inner peace is not the absence of conflict, but rather the meeting with our own soul. For Jung, the inner voice reflects our entire psyche, formed by both the conscious and unconscious. However, listening to it is challenging. It requires diving into the depths of our being, where we keep everything we've repressed, denied, or avoided. On this journey, the individuation process is key. Individuation is the development of a true, authentic self where each person seeks to integrate the various parts of themselves, including the shadow, representing those aspects of our personality we'd rather hide. Jung believed that we possess two centers, the ego and the self. The ego is our conscious part, the one that identifies us and organizes our perception of the world. The self, on the other hand, is the core of our entire psyche, encompassing both conscious and unconscious aspects. The inner voice is largely an expression of the self, as it attempts to bring to the surface important facets of our essence that the ego often doesn't understand or actively avoids. Listening to this voice requires the courage to face what Jung calls the process of confronting the shadow. The shadow includes our fears, insecurities, and traits we deem unacceptable, but are, in fact, genuine parts of who we are. The more we resist it, the more it remains hidden, influencing our lives unconsciously and often sabotaging our desires and relationships. Thus, listening to the inner voice means, in part, learning to accept the shadow and giving it space to reveal itself. As we allow ourselves to hear this voice and confront these internal aspects, we open up the possibility of integration, the recognition of each piece of our soul. Jung described this integration process as an act of balance, where conflicting parts find harmony. And it's at this point that peace with our inner voice becomes possible, not by eliminating difficulties or erasing shadows, but by discovering, in the union of all these parts, a greater sense of wholeness. To understand how the inner voice influences our daily lives, let's imagine two common situations. The first involves someone who constantly seeks external approval, suppressing their own desires and dreams to meet others' expectations. Instead of listening to their own voice, they silence it in order to please those around them. Over time, this behavior leads to a disconnection from oneself, creating a sense of emptiness and alienation. The second situation centers on someone living under the weight of a deep-seated fear of failure. This fear, born from past criticism or negative experiences, has been buried over the years. Rather than facing this fear, it was pushed into the unconscious. However, whenever a new opportunity arises, an inner echo surfaces, telling them they're not capable, an echo that can sabotage them before they even try. This is the voice of the shadow, which grows stronger each time we ignore it, directly impacting this person's decisions and well-being. These stories illustrate the importance of developing a healthy relationship with the inner voice. In the first case, by ignoring their own needs, the person disconnects from the self, leading to a feeling of emptiness and lack of purpose. In the second, the repressed fear takes control, emerging in moments of vulnerability. Integrating these shadow aspects, as Jung suggests, is the path to greater balance. Accepting and listening to the inner voice doesn't mean giving weight to every self-criticism, but rather understanding its origins and meanings. The inner voice acts like a mirror, reflecting both our desires and our traumas, bringing to light what needs to be understood and accepted. This requires moments of reflection, silence, and above all, honesty with oneself. For someone who lives to please others, listening to their inner voice can mean rediscovering and honoring their true desires. For someone who fears failure, it might be an opportunity to confront that fear and find ways to overcome it. In the end, peace with the inner voice is not a permanent state, but a continuous practice of self-awareness. When we start to listen to ourselves with openness and compassion, the inner voice becomes an ally in the individuation journey, revealing who we truly are and allowing us to live more fully. The journey to find peace with the inner voice is not just a personal reconciliation, but also a profound connection with the collective unconscious. Jung described the collective unconscious as a reservoir of shared human experiences, myths, and symbols, expressed through archetypes, universal images, and ideas that appear in dreams, myths, and stories. These archetypes, like the sage, the hero, or the divine child, are not merely imaginary. They represent psychological forces that guide and shape our lives. When we listen to our inner voice, we connect not only with our conscious thoughts, but also with these archetypes within our unconscious. They offer a symbolic map to help us navigate our own complexities. For instance, someone facing a fear of inadequacy may find strength in the archetype of the hero, a source of courage to confront their insecurities. Connecting with this archetypal force reminds us that we all, on some level, face similar challenges and that the journey towards self-understanding and acceptance is universal. Another significant figure is the archetype of the shadow, one of the most intriguing in Jung's work. The shadow represents those aspects we repress, which often strive to be recognized. Embracing our shadow requires courage and openness, as it contains both our weaknesses and hidden potential. Often, what we most avoid recognizing within ourselves also holds the greatest potential for growth. The shadow, then, is not merely the dark side of our personality. It is also a source of creative energy that, if integrated, can enrich and expand our sense of identity. Finding peace with the inner voice involves recognizing and integrating these archetypes. When we connect with these symbolic images, we build a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. Through this bridge, we can hear our inner voice more clearly, understanding it not as something to fear, but as a guide. Jung described individuation as the integration of these various elements into a whole, where each part, fear, desire, shadow, and hero, has its place. Thus, finding peace with our inner voice means recognizing that we are made up of many selves, each with its importance and function. Integration leads us to a state of genuine acceptance, where all parts of our psyche work in harmony, allowing us to live more completely and consciously. The quest for peace with the inner voice is a transformative and liberating journey. Carl Jung taught us that the path inward is filled with challenges, but also profound revelations. Finding this peace doesn't mean achieving a perfect or unchanging state of calm, but rather building an honest and compassionate relationship with all parts of ourselves. It's about practicing acceptance and integration of our inner conflicts, rather than repressing them, and realizing that true serenity comes from accepting who we are. This acceptance, which Jung described as essential to the individuation process, allows us to live a more authentic and fulfilling life. When we listen to our inner voice, we give the self a chance to emerge in all its complexity and truth. Individuation isn't about becoming something different, but about returning to who we truly are beyond the roles, masks, and conditioning we accumulate over time. Every time we pause to listen with empathy and without judgment, we create space for this inner voice to express itself more clearly. This space is where transformation happens. As we listen, we recognize that this voice consists of our dreams, fears, potentials, and even the parts we avoid. Instead of getting lost in external demands, we find strength and direction within ourselves, guided by a voice that reflects our true essence. Jung reminded us that the process of individuation, the journey of becoming who we truly are, requires patience and courage. He once said, "What you resist, persist," suggesting that the parts of our psyche we avoid or repress continue to influence us until they are acknowledged. Finding peace with the inner voice ultimately means recognizing that true freedom comes from accepting our totality. It is a commitment to facing life with integrity, embracing both light and shadow. For those seeking peace with their own inner voice, Jung's invitation is clear: know all the theories, master all the techniques. But as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. We are invited to view ourselves with the same care and compassion we would show another, recognizing that our journey is unique and valuable. In the end, may we live in a way that is true to who we really are, knowing that the peace we find within will reflect in our outer world.